So in this lecture I will discuss about the autonomic nervous system. Autonomic nervous system is the portion of the nervous system that controls the functional activities of the different visual organs of our body, and it controls it automatically. The nervous system is divided into two parts mainly, that is the central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. Peripheral nervous system is consisting of the cranial and spinal nerves and peripheral ganglia. So functionally, the peripheral nervous system is consisting of somatic nervous system and autonomic nervous system. Somatic nervous system controls the contraction of the skeletal muscles, whereas the autonomic nervous system consisting of the sympathetic and parasympathetic subdivisions, which is responsible for controlling the activities of different secretory glands, cardiac and smooth muscles, and therefore they are primarily concerned with the control of the internal environment. There are some common features of the autonomic nervous system. Both of these nervous system, that is both sympathetic and parasympathetic subdivisions, are consisting of the peripheral nerves, that is the cranial and spinal nerves, and both are having ganglion. Here the ganglion is located. They are consisting of one preganglionic neuron, this one, and one postganglionic neuron, which remains connected with the effector organ. These effector organs either will be the muscles or glands. Next feature is that both the pre and postganglionic neuron of the autonomic nervous system releases the neurotransmitter, and these neurotransmitters are acetylcholine and epinephrine or norepinephrine. So they releases neurotransmitter at their nerve ending, and the preganglionic neuron of the both sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, preganglionic neuron, this one is the preganglionic neuron, they releases acetylcholine, and the postganglionic neuron actually releases the epinephrine in case of sympathetic nervous system and acetylcholine in case of parasympathetic nervous system. So in case of parasympathetic nervous system, both preganglionic neuron and postganglionic neuron releases acetylcholine, whereas in case of sympathetic nervous system, the preganglionic neuron releases acetylcholine, whereas the postganglionic neuron releases epinephrine. So difference is there. The postganglionic neuron, in case of sympathetic nervous system, releases epinephrine, whereas it releases acetylcholine. So these release of two different types of neurotransmitter actually creates the different activity. Even the similar organ is connected by the sympathetic and parasympathetic subdivisions or parasympathetic nerves. So another important difference between the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system is that instead of neurotransmitter release, that is the preganglionic neuron of the sympathetic nervous system is shorter than the postganglionic neuron, and in case of parasympathetic nervous system, preganglionic neuron is longer than the postganglionic neuron. So this is the difference. As because in case of sympathetic nervous system, the ganglions which are located nearer to the spinal cord, and that's why preganglionic neuron has to travel a shorter distance, whereas the postganglionic neuron has to travel a long distance to reach up to the effector organ. That's why the postganglionic neuron in sympathetic nervous system is longer. And in case of parasympathetic nervous system, the ganglions are located nearer to the effector organ. That's why the postganglionic neuron has to travel a shorter distance, whereas the preganglionic neuron has to travel longer distance to reach up to the ganglion. So in this picture you can find that the heart is connected by both parasympathetic nerves as well as the sympathetic nerves. The sympathetic ganglion is located nearer to the spinal cord. That's why it has to travel a shorter distance to reach up to the ganglia, whereas the postganglionic neuron has to travel a longer distance to reach up to the heart. Whereas in case of parasympathetic nerves, the preganglionic neuron has to travel a longer distance to reach up to the ganglia, which is located nearer to the heart, whereas the postganglionic neuron has to travel short distance to reach up to the heart. So this is the difference. So if you compare the sympathetic and parasympathetic subdivision, you can find that there is a difference in between their origin. The parasympathetic nervous system is craniosacral in nature. That means it is consisting of third, seventh, ninth, and 10th cranial nerves, as well as the second and fourth sacral nerve. So it is craniosacral in origin. Whereas the sympathetic subdivisions is thoracolumbar in origin. It is consisting of the thoracic nerves 1 to 12 and lumbar nerve first and second. And what I told earlier, the ganglions in case of parasympathetic nervous system is located nearer to the effector organ, and whereas the in case of sympathetic nervous system it is located nearer to the spinal cord, and that's why the preganglionic fibers are different lengths in these both systems. There is also differences in the neurotransmitter I discussed earlier, and the preganglionic neuron of the both sympathetic and parasympathetic subdivision releases acetylcholine, whereas the postganglionic neuron releases acetylcholine in case of parasympathetic nervous system, but in case of sympathetic nervous system it releases adrenaline or noradrenaline. If we consider the distribution is discrete organ towards the discrete organ only in case of parasympathetic nervous system, but in case of sympathetic nervous system its distribution is widespread. If you consider the activity of the parasympathetic nervous system, it is anabolic in nature, and in the sympathetic nervous system, if you consider the activity of the sympathetic nervous system, so the effects whatever we can found, it is catabolic in nature. Okay, thank you.